Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Angie Keller, Senior Partner Manager at Innova. I'm excited for today's webinar, Workplaces That Work, Strategies to Engage and Retain Your Workforce, presented by Innova's partner, ZayZoon. ZayZoon is an innovator in the earned wage access space. Additionally, ZayZoon provides financial education, employee engagement tools like rewards and recognition, and valuable financial perks, including savings on prescription and insurance, all aimed at boosting employee satisfaction and enhancing the overall workplace experience. Innova Payroll is a national employer solutions company headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee, with offices throughout the U.S. Innova provides a unified platform and full portfolio of payroll and HR services, including HR outsourcing and employee benefits. For attending our 1-hour webinar today, you will receive SHRM, HRCI, and NASBA credit. You can expect to receive your certificate and this webinar recording in 2 separate emails early next week. During the webinar, please feel free to submit questions at any time through our Q&A widget at the bottom of your screen. We'll get to as many questions as we can, and if we're not able to get to your questions, we will follow up with you after. Be sure to stay on throughout the entire webinar to secure your credit hour. And now I'm pleased to introduce our guest speaker, Jess Petrella, the Senior Director of Product Marketing at ZayZoon. Jess brings market initiatives, earned wage access solutions tailored to small and mid-sized businesses. She's worked in SaaS for over 12 years, and in that time has brought dozens of innovative products to the market. She is focused keenly on driving customer value through products that resonate, inspire trust, and make financial wellness feel approachable and actionable. I'll turn it over to you, Jess.
Wonderful. Thank you, Angie, and thanks, Innova, for having us here today. Thank you all for being here today. We are talking about engaging and retaining your workforce. And we will go through a couple different modules today, mostly with the focus on walking away with practical strategies for meaningfully improving employee experience. We'll do that in a few ways. There'll be a bit of an investigation that we'll work through together. It'll be kind of fun. But first of all, we'll work through understanding connection between shifting labor dynamics and changing employee expectations. It's a big part of this presentation. We'll also explore opportunities for strengthening the employer-employee relationship in order to improve employee engagement. We're also going to learn about financial and workplace benefit programs that tie this together to help you empower your workers in the workplace. So let's get right into it. We like to start these presentations with this statement: nobody wants to work anymore. And this is a quote purposely. That's something that we hear, and I want to hear from you all. I think we have a poll that we're about to put up for the group. Have you thought this recently? Have you heard someone say this recently? Is this something that has been in your circles of discussion? Nobody wants to work anymore, this sentiment. So please fill out the poll. Have you heard someone say this recently? Have you thought this yourself?
The poll is, the answers are coming in. We'll give it just a few more seconds. All right, I'm about to show the results.
Okay, so an insurmountable amount of folks have felt or seen people say nobody wants to work anymore. And that is very common. It is something we hear every single day. We were talking to employers across North America. But a big question that I have as a person who works in product, who develops products for employers to help them to connect to their workforce, is this true? Does nobody want to work anymore? And so there's some general evidence towards this, things that we have seen. We know that almost 1/4 of the US workers are feeling engaged in the workplace. That leaves 3/4 unengaged in the workforce, right? 63% of HR professionals have told us that financial stress is lowering the productivity of their employees, right? So these are things that we've always sort of known, but we wanted to go deeper, right? And we wanted to pull out some evidence here. Nobody wants to work anymore. Why, right? What does that look like? And is it true, right? So we are going to look at 3 pieces of evidence today. First, we're going to dig into annual turnover rates. Second, we're going to look at new attractive job options that are emerging. And 3, we're going to look at workforce that is going through another big change and sort of unpack some of those dynamics that are important for this group to understand. So first things first, the first piece of evidence for nobody wants to work anymore points in the direction that annual turnover rates are at an all-time high, and that is true, right? This is prevalent across all primary industries. We look at the overall restaurant industry, so folks employing servers, cashiers, cooks, back office admin. In the restaurant industry, we're seeing 75% annual turnover rates. That jumps up to 130 for quick service restaurants, all the way over to home services and trades, 65% annual turnover rates across the US, right? These are increasing, and these are increasing and climbing over time. And that is something that is important when we investigate the idea that nobody wants to work anymore. This could easily point to, well, yep, they're leaving their jobs, therefore they don't want to work, right? So let's keep that in mind as a piece of evidence. It's also important because these turnover rates, dependent or regardless of what industry you work in, are costing you. So we see an average of $4,000 to $10,000 to backfill a worker, right? So to replace a worker that has left. These costs are not always visible. Sometimes they're visible, like talent acquisition and hiring, but there's invisible costs here too, right? That attribute to this $4,000 and $10,000. That looks like payroll and admin cost, that is onboarding and the time spent there, right? And across the US, that looks like $360 billion spent on annual turnover in order to replace employees that are leaving the workplace. So this costs you, right? And that adds up over time per worker, especially if you're in an industry with increasing turnover rates. It's important for us to understand that this is going to be the silver lining. That points towards this evidence. I want to make sure there's some good news peppered throughout this. We know that there is something that can be done about this. So we will end on that note, but I want to throw this in here midway. ZayZoon, as an earned wage access provider, we see that providing financial benefits can reduce your turnover rate. So there is light at the end of that tunnel, but it is something that's still really important for us to understand and be aware of that is going to affect our business if we don't do something about it, right, as an employer. So the second piece of evidence, right, we're looking at nobody wants to work anymore. Well, they do, people have to work, but there are new attractive job options in the market, right? So when we look at 23% of employees having a second job, so that's 1/4 of your workforce, they may have a second job because they're, wanting to supplement their income. They may be exploring other job paths. There's a number of reasons why they may take on a second job. But we do hear from employers that this can affect showing up for your shift. So absenteeism being a big problem. This can affect your business in that, someone may just leave because they have a safety net and a second job. They may just walk out, not give an explanation, may not even give notice, and that leaves you out to high and dry. Right. So it is important to understand that job options are going to be available to employees outside of your business, and they are taking advantage of those. Right. And then another chunk here is around the gig economy and gig work. So gig work looks like things like driving Uber or taking part in TaskRabbit and doing odd jobs in order to make an income. Currently, in today's world, 1 in 6 workers are gig workers in an organization. So 1 in 6 of your employees are likely to be taking part as a second job or a second mode of income in the gig economy, right? And that is only going to increase. So by 2027, it's projected that 50%, so half of US workers, will participate in gigs, in gig work, right? And we're going to unpack gig work a little bit more as we go along in this course, but it is important for us to keep that in mind because it's not inobvious, right? Like we ourselves have used DoorDash in the past week, right? Have you done that? Has anybody left their dog with someone on Rover, right? Pet sitting. That's in an app and easy to do, and it has thousands of pet sitters available. How many people have taken an Uber in the last few months? This is Walter, our office dog. He's taken an Uber in the last couple of weeks, right? So we're interacting, we're seeing this surging need and employees filling that gap. But the real important piece here, and like I said, we will continue to unpack this dynamic. But the important takeaway here is that, you are employing, for the most part, shift workers, right? But then there's also this dynamic of new type of work, which is gig workers. It's the same employee persona. So the same type of employee is moving from a more traditional role to a new alternative role, which is gig work, right? And the question we ask ourselves is why? Why would they be moving to gig work? Why is that a better alternative or new alternative to a more traditional job like shift work, right? So I will unpack that. That's going to be a bit of a put a pin on it cliffhanger for us. We will get there, but that's something that we want to keep in mind, right? So far we've taken a look at an increased turnover rates across all major industries. The evidence could be mounted there that sure, nobody wants to work anymore because they're leaving their jobs. But then we look at new alternatives in the workplace, things like gig work, that become an alternative for more traditional roles. And people may be leaving more traditional roles for those gig works. And now the third piece of evidence here is a changing workforce. So the workforce is consistently going through change, whether it's a recession, whether it's the post fallout of the pandemic, it's always going to be going through an evolution, right? And it's important for us to always understand what that next evolution looks like. So things sort of stabilize post pandemic as jobs increased and hiring increased. But we are at a bit of a different point right now where there is a new change in dynamic. So I did mention gig work, but I also want to talk about something that is prevalent. 60% of Gen Z are making up the workforce today, right? So this is a generation that is aging up and they're entering the workforce. And we do need to know something a little bit different about this generation. Every generation is different. How they show up at work is going to be different. And that is forcing an evolution in how we think about the employer-employee relationship. So I want to dig into that one a little bit more. This is coming out of ZayZoon's recent Gen Z in the Workplace report. So we surveyed thousands of employees who are of Gen Z generation, and we've learned about them, right? What is going on in their mind when it comes to getting their first job or their first or second job? So a lot of this has to do with how Gen Z sees themselves. Gen Z employees want to be taken seriously in the workplace, but they're aware of the general sentiment that and stereotypes that they're lazy or entitled or inexperienced or don't want to work, right? And this is a perception that doesn't really do them any justice and doesn't really support them as they enter the workforce. But they are still very much part of the folks that you are hiring and retaining, right? So it's an important audience to understand. So we asked Gen Z employees about the challenges they're experiencing in the workplace, in their current or past workplaces, right? They're going into their first and second jobs. A staggering 50% of employees cited a lack of financial support as an issue, but above that, even more prevalent, lack of clear communication in the workplace, right? We also see lack of career growth as being a issue for them, stressing them out, not making them feel connected in the workplace, not really wanting to give them a reason to stay. They're not feeling heard and valued, and they have limited flexibility, whether it's financial or otherwise. And this isn't altogether different than other worker dynamics or other generations that are in the workplace. But the difference with Gen Z is that they kind of understand what these new alternatives are, right? They're kind of understanding that they do have options and they are starting to demand something a little different from their employers. And that's the big part of the evolution here and why it matters that 60 and then 70, then 80% of the workforce is going to be made up of this new generation. So that's another piece there of evidence. And by the way, this is coming from, like I mentioned, our recent report. We're more than happy to share that out if anyone wants to dig in here. Like I said, super important for us to understand what this generation is requiring from their employer and why that's changing. All right, so we've gone through a few pieces of evidence, right? We know turnover rates are increasing. They're not showing any sign of slowing down anytime soon. We know that workers have more alternatives than ever, things like gig work that are more attractive, but why, right? We can unpack that in a moment. And then third, the workplace is changing. So Gen Z's entering the workplace, 3.5 million open shift work jobs available. So having harder and harder time filling those jobs. A lot of that has to do with new alternatives that are coming up that are outside of the more traditional jobs for individuals. All right, so we're getting to our conclusion here, and then we're going to unpack some opportunities for employers to be able to respond to some of these changing dynamics. So nobody wants to work anymore. The general sentiment around that is like, are workers lazy? So that's the question. Are workers lazy? Or, right, is there another way to look at this? Do they just want a better deal? And the Gen Z audience and our reporting and our research there has kind of started to point us in this direction, right? So we've talked to, and not just Gen Z, we've talked to 100 of frontline shift and deskless employees, but what makes them stick around in a job? And it's showed up consistently as 5 primary things. One of those things is control. The second is recognition. The third is connection. The fourth is opportunity. And the fifth is confidence, right? So if they're feeling one or many of these things, and they're getting one or many of these things from their employer in the workplace, they start to feel more valued, more connected, etc. And they stick around for the job. And we are effectively seeing when we're deploying 1 or 2 or 3 of these strategies against these, we see a decrease in turnover annually, right? So that is really the silver lining, is that we've learned about what workers expect today. And that changes things, right? So like I said, we were going to unpack gig worker a little bit more. What can we really learn from the gig worker? Why are they turning to driving an Uber or signing up for Rover and being a pet sitter? Why are they doing that and quitting their, job as a cashier, job as a truck driver, job as a, in the trades for something alternative, right? And something that is surging. It's because they get to experience a work experience across all 5 of these vectors, right? So for control, they get to feel like they work for themselves, which gives them a great deal of control. They get to choose their own hours and work when they want. They get paid same day, so they have control over their finances. They work X amount of hours in the day. They get X amount of dollars in their bank account at the end of the day, right? So they have that control. They have that recognition. They get customer reviews, like think of an Uber driver. They get star ratings. They get tips. They get thank yous from the folks that they're helping in that moment. So they feel recognized for the job that they're doing instantaneously. They get a sense of connection. They get to meet new people. They get to be out in the world. They have camaraderie against other gig workers, other drivers, other folks that are in their space. They're usually working through an app, so they have that opportunity to chat with and message and ask questions to other gig workers. And that's all very tech enhanced. They have opportunity, so they earn more money whenever they need it. There's not really a limit, right? They can work on a Sunday morning versus waiting to get added to a shift. They have that flexibility and opportunity. And then the final one there is confidence. They get to earn money doing something they really enjoy, whether that's driving or doing odd jobs or pet sitting. There's just a lot more opportunity there to find a role that matches up with things that make you feel confident, right? So that's what we, as more traditional employers, can learn from the apps that are employing gig workers and the companies that are employing gig workers. They really are offering employees these opportunities, right? And this can kind of feel out of reach. It's like, great, I'm not going to become an Uber. How do I offer these things? And we'll get to that in a moment when we get to some strategies for how a more traditional employer might be able to evolve. But really, the conclusion here is that workers aren't lazy. They really do just want a better deal, and they're demanding that. And they want that from you, their employer, right? And that can feel like a tall order, because those are a lot of things that we've talked through, right? And we have a lot on our plates. And the strategy that we're going to talk about here today is how to get to these things incrementally over time with lower lift. And it's very much possible, right? It's just really a matter about having the tools in your hands and understanding the what and why behind them. Right, so they want this from you. And so we kind of look at this as, I use the word traditional employer, I've used the words evolving employer, and I kind of want to unpack that and make that feel really clear. There's no real like good or bad. It's just that, as I mentioned with those 3 pieces of evidence, it's evolving. And so we want to evolve with it. We want to match and meet Gen Z where they're at, create workplaces where they're going to stay, ultimately lowering turnover rates. We should see that decrease over time as new tools are deployed across employers across the US. And then also we want to sort of compete with some of these better alternatives, right? Better in the mind of your employees. So what does that look like to practically be a traditional employer that's beginning to evolve, right? So the first thing, a traditional employer we often see, they expect employees to perform regardless of a state of mind, right? We have employees coming in, working, leaving, and that's a constant system. It's sort of stood the test of time, and it feels like it's something that can be on autopilot, right? But an evolving employer recognizes that maybe like it shouldn't be so on autopilot. Employees' well-being and mental state drives productivity, so I should invest a bit in it, right? I should spend a little bit of time understanding what they need and deploying some strategies to be able to support them, give them a reason to stay, right? A traditional employer may look at turnover as an unavoidable cost of business, right? It's just the way it is. It's how it always has been. Everyone else in my industry has turnover, and so do I, right? But an evolving employer sees that there is something you can do about it. You can actively invest in workplace culture and employee recognition, for example. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as well today. A traditional employer only communicates when necessary with little employee feedback. We're calling this out because sometimes that's just like necessity. There's 100 things going on in a day. Employers, it's not always top of mind to be proactively communicating with your employees. And that's just something that happens. It's a symptom of being busy. It's a symptom of doing things the way they've always been, or just maybe not having the tools or the education across those tools on how to deploy them to improve workplace engagement, right? An evolving employer leverages those tools and those opportunities and those strategies to engage employees through regular check-ins and open feedbacks and new tooling. A traditional, and you can see where I'm going with this, right? Traditional employer believes financial struggles are personal and the company has no role, but an evolving employer looks at that and faces it, addresses employee financial stress through education and support, through benefits and offerings, which ultimately, make the employer more competitive in the hiring space as well. And then finally, traditional employer has rigid schedules, workplace policies with little concern for work-life balance. Again, like that's just sometimes the unfortunate perspective of like, we're doing things the way they've always been. We don't really feel like we can do much else. We're doing our best, and everyone is, right? But there are things that we can do to evolve, to offer workplace policies, things like flexible scheduling that support well-being, right? So again, I think it's obvious where I'm going with it. We're looking at this in most simplest terms. Traditional employer can be looked at as quite passive. You're hiring, firing, backfilling, et cetera. And evolving employers active. They're actively looking for ways to engage their workplace, give them a reason to stay. So this is our next question here, because I do want to call out, like, in a way, even if it's small, every employer is evolving in some way or another. Some are doing a lot, some are doing a little, some are just trying to, figure out what the right things to do are. No one really is stuck or wanting to be stuck in this traditional employer space. There's no real reason other than like super busy or like, too many priorities for the business to be passive. Everyone is wanting and actively moving towards being a more active employer. So we are going to talk through ways to do that at a greater opportunity. But I also kind of want to hear, like, what are you doing to evolve as an employer? So we have another poll here. What's one thing that you've done in the last year or so to improve employees' lives. So we have a text box there, even if it's just one word or one thing, we'd love to hear about it. I'm going to read through a couple of them.
Don't be shy, guys. We'll give it a couple minutes. Is everybody seeing that poll box? If you can't see it, type into the chat. Okay, we got some answers coming in. Thank you, guys. I'm excited to see these results. We'll give it just another minute or two.
Yeah, and it can be things big or small. It doesn't have to be fully like, hey, I have this whole plan and strategy to evolve. It can be, this is one thing I've done and I'm proud of to improve employees' lives in your workplace. I think if we've got a couple in, maybe we can.
Yep, we will go ahead and close out and I will share the results. Here we go. Those results, Jess?
So I can't see the results. I can see that we have a bunch of answered, but would you like to maybe read one or maybe two or three out?
Yep, I will go ahead and do so. So hybrid work, more floating holidays. We've got, oh, this is a good one. Monthly surprise gifts in the mail for, and then working remotely. Planning out bonuses for year end. Summer hours, I know that's been a popular one. They do half day Fridays, encouraging employees to use all PTO. Increased PCO for employees. An EAP plan, annual rewards program, remote access to work from home when needed, team bonding events, it's a great one, financial health meetings, that's a good one, additional health insurance options, interest-free loans for employees who can pay back through payroll deductions. They've, one attendee said they absorbed the increase in insurance costs so our employees wouldn't have to, and we upgraded our PTO and sick leave policies. We've got anniversary gift cards, another summer Fridays, birthday emails to employees and anniversary emails, lunch, learned about 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace. That's one I want to learn more about. That's interesting. They hired an associate VP of employee relations, sent out an anonymous engagement survey to the team, then acted upon and followed through on several team requests pertinent to PTO, holiday pay, and compensation, and then hired a process innovation position to allow employees to share struggles and get someone to build a solution to frustration points for employees. Wow, these are some really great things. These are awesome.
Yeah, that is fantastic. So that's really exciting. This is a fantastic group, and we usually hear a couple of things here and there, but you all are really moving towards this bucket here of the evolving employer, which is fantastic. And I think we can all learn from each other as well. Some of the things that a few of you are already doing are going to come up as strategies here. So learning from each other is super important. That put a smile on my face. That's wonderful to hear.
Me too.
You all are doing wonderful. Okay, so that's what we're here to talk about, right? So let's talk about some of those strategies for the evolved employer. So we've talked about these 5 vectors. If you're doing one thing in one of the buckets, you're already evolving, right? If you're doing several things in several of the buckets, you have become evolved, right? And you're giving your employees more of what they demand, giving them more reasons to stay and not really look outwards towards some of the other opportunities. So let's talk a little bit about strategies for the involved employer. The first one is giving your employees control. So one of those things that can lead to control in the world of like financial control, control over their finances, is offer flexible pay options for pay access, right? So those are things like EWA, different ways to get their paycheck, different ways to get tips at the end of the day, different ways to get paid out. So looking into flexible options to be able to achieve that is something that we have seen on our end as an opportunity to greatly drive down annual turnover costs. But really all that means is that you have happier employees who are more willing to stay with you because you offer something that they can't really get elsewhere, right? Other ways that you can offer control, find ways to introduce better shift and scheduling flexibility, better communication around shifts and scheduling, for example. Opportunity, something that all employees are looking for, offering financial perks. So some of you mentioned this in the poll, offering things that help employees save money, right? So working with vendors through you to be able to give them opportunities to save money across things like health insurance or pet insurance, opportunities and solutions and tools offered through you to improve credit. These can be one-off, so working with vendors or through a marketplace. So there are many perks marketplaces that you can leverage to be able to find solutions of this front. So it gives them opportunities, take a little bit more control and get more out of their paycheck. And then strategies for the evolved employer, recognition being the third vector here. I heard, I think from a few of you, launching a rewards and recognition program. This has come up time and time and again. It is at the top of most employers' lists, and there's a reason, because recognition is at the top of most employees' list of what they want in the workplace. We'll actually be sharing out a guide to launching a rewards and recognition program with you all. This is something that's been tried and true on our end, makes it easy for you to do and accessible for you to do through UKG. And then also acknowledging and celebrating key milestones. It's something small that you can do. Again, I think a few of you called out, monthly shout outs and parties and things like that. I think that is super important. And it's something that we see employees responding very well to. Milestones are of a plenty, right? So your first week completed, your first client or customer rating or feedback that a customer has shared for an employee, birthdays, anniversaries, so first year, things like that. So there's always a milestone that can be leveraged in the life cycle of your employee to acknowledge and celebrate and recognize. Connection is a big one. You saw that at the top of the list for Gen Z specifically. So improving your communication tooling is something that goes a long ways. A lot of folks are, working through email. They may not have an email for every one of their employees. Sometimes they're working through text message, but it's hard to, see that they've seen it or ensure that you have the full message there, that you have everyone in the right chain. So improving your communication tooling is a simpler one, easier one. There are several options here available to employers, to be able to improve your workplace communication tooling. Sharing regular ENPS surveys. So that was another one of you called out, surveying your employees for how they are feeling, what they are thinking, what feedback they have for you or for their peers, and then actioning against that. There are many tools to be able to do that. That is a very simple one to do. It can be done regularly. You can then use that to understand how you're improving or things are changing in the eyes of the employee. So getting to the heart of how your employee's feeling in the workplace, sometimes doing that anonymously goes a long way. So that's also something to keep in mind. Considering peer-to-peer experience is also really important. They have colleagues, right? Some of them work shoulder to shoulder, some of them work remotely or mobile on the road. They may not have that connection in their day-to-day. So finding ways and strategies to ensure that they're able to connect, have conversations, share their shared experiences, really, really important, right? To consider it's not just about connection between you and your employee, it's also about your employees because they are sharing experience. They have that in common. They work together. They work in similar jobs for a similar client or customer, and that goes a long way. So those are some of the strategies that we can leverage when we're looking at increasing and improving connection in the workplace. And then finally, confidence. A lot of this comes from either financial confidence or career confidence. So we look at both of those vectors. Offering financial and career education is something that is a lower lift, but a high reward. It's something that not a lot of employers are offering today. There are many different opportunities to be able to do that through different tools and products and applications. So offering financial and career education goes a long way. It helps level up your employees in a way that doesn't necessarily require you to be hands-on or your managers to be hands-on. It's something that can be offered, reiterated, and shared as a benefit or a perk of working. Offering budgeting tools also helps your employees get a paycheck from you, helping them use that money in a way that will be productive, especially for the younger employees, but also, prevalent across all generations in the workforce. Really important to be able to arm them with these tools that'll develop confidence. And then, simple things like communicating growth paths go a long way as well. We've heard that through our surveying quite frequently. Staying at a company and staying in the role that you have without a lot of opportunity, or at least a lot of vocalized opportunity to grow, learn new skills, develop, that can go a long way to make that clear for your workers. So those are the several strategies across these 5 vectors. If you're doing one of them today, amazing. If you're doing several of them today across these, if you are building a recognition program and improving your communication, you're offering financial perks or earned wage access or alternative benefits that help you be competitive, but also help your employees be happy in the workplace. Kudos, right? You're evolving. For those folks who are looking at this like, oh, I have some work to do, or I have some opportunities to be able to engage my workplace, amazing, right? Any one of these things your employees will respond well to. We've seen it time and time and again. We've talked to hundreds of clients, thousands of employees, and we've seen that any combination of these are going to improve workplace engagement, effectively turn around turnover. All right, so all of that being said, that's what we look at as the connected workplace. What that means really is that you're actively nurturing the employee-employee relationship through comprehensive financial and workplace benefits across these 5 vectors, right? And then we highlight things like pay access, financial perks, rewards and recognition programs, communication tools, financial education. All of these things, if you're doing one or more of them, are going to help you evolve, right? Become a place where employees want to work. But it also creates that truly engaged and loyal workforce, right? And we've seen this time and time and again, day after day. So when we look at the evidence of nobody wants to work anymore, we look at all the things that play into that and all the dynamics in the workplace, we really realize that the employer has a great deal of opportunity in their hands to become active, to evolve, and to lean into some of these areas to help connect them and their employees. So the main call to action here before we move into Q&A is really be a place where workers actually want to be. And it's possible, right? It is possible to be a place where workers want to be. It takes some effort. It takes some education and understanding of what the opportunities are. But really, when you get into it, a lot of these things are pretty low lift to deploy, right? And it seems like, and wonderful, like I said, put a huge smile on my face to see all the things that you're already deploying. And hopefully this opens up more and more opportunities as we learn about the things we can do that aren't terribly high lift and that we can execute, right? So the call to action here continued is to abolish this concept that nobody wants to work anymore because it's untrue altogether. That is the conclusion of today. And really do one new thing to support your employees, right? So we learned about these 5 vectors. We learned about several things under each of them that we can be deploying. Do one of them. Do one thing to support your employees for the next month or 2 months or this quarter. And you will start to see that, you send out a survey, start to see how your employees are thinking and feeling about those changes. So that's that. And I just want to leave it on this one last note before we go into Q&A. The reason why I am so passionate about this, why we build products for people who are also wanting to be passionate about this. ZayZoon's on a mission to save 10 million employees, $10 billion. We do that through offering innovative and effective financial products and workplace benefits at the intersection of payroll employers and employees. We do that in partnership with Innova for clients like you. So that is why I'm here, why I'm so passionate about it. And I hope this was incredibly beneficial. So we're going to move to Q&A in the last couple of minutes here. Like I mentioned before, we will be sharing our rewards and recognition employer guide, so how to get our R&R program off the ground and up and running for little to no cost, and in a way that will be fairly manageable, regardless of your tech proficiency, regardless of the time that you have on your hands. So we hope that's super helpful. If a rewards and recognition program was your one thing that you may want to do today for your employees, that should help you get off the ground with it. So thank you so much. I hope this was incredibly helpful, and I think we can move over to QA.
I'm looking at the QA. Guys, if you have any questions, please open up that QA box and A box down at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to ask. It could be about what we discussed today, about ZayZoon, anything. Let's see. Cool. Here, Jess. What is the number one benefit that employees request?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I might just pop back to what we see is on the connection front. So communication and clarity of that communication is very high on the employees list. Pay access is continuously coming up. Being able to get paid for wages that you've earned and not have to wait till payday, that comes up fairly frequently as well. So those would probably be the top requested sort of like perks and opportunities in the workplace. And then what they need, recognition comes up very high on the list as well. So launching a rewards and recognition program is probably your best way to respond to that. But it does, like, depending on the employee, depending on the workplace, depending on the strategies you've already deployed, it could be a mix of those things.
That's great. That's great. And I know we saw some people talking about the recognition and what they're doing to recognize employees on their front. So I was excited to see that. We've got another question. What are some recommendations to improve employee engagement when employees are based in client locations? We have minimal control over schedule and rate of pay options as a nonprofit.
Right. Yeah, and that's common, right? We don't always have the ability to pay more, right? So a good alternative to that is pay more frequently, right? So things like earned wage access is something that can be available to every employee, regardless of location, regardless of state. So that is something that we tend to see is when we want to create some pay flexibility. We don't always have that option to pay more, but we can pay more frequently. So that's one thing I'd call out on that front. And then also when you're looking at things like workplace connection, like communication tools, for example, look at solutions that have multi-location capabilities. So if you do need to communicate with just a certain location or broadly across all employees, you're able to have that capability and opportunity.
Great, great. Any more questions? Feel free to ask. We'll leave it up for just a few more minutes. Sometimes some of those answers spur some other questions, I know.
And you all can reach out at any time. We're always more than happy to chat more about these things, go a little bit deeper on some of the strategies. So please feel free to always reach out to our team or the Innova team.
Yeah, and I will say ZayZoon puts together some awesome research. We're going to include one of their guides in the follow-up email that will be sent with the recording. And just to recap, there will be an email that comes with the recording, and then a separate email that will be sent both next week with your certificate of completion for attending today's webinar. All right, I don't see any more questions coming through. Thank you, Jess, and thank you, ZayZoon, and everybody for attending today. We really appreciate your time, and be on the lookout next week for your recording and certificate. And again, if you have any questions after this, feel free to reach out to the ZayZoon team or our Innova team.
Wonderful.
Thank you all.